On January 21st, two communities came together to observe the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at the Union County Arts Center in Rahway, New Jersey. The program was sponsored by the African American Jewish Relations Committee of Central New Jersey, the Jewish Community Relations Council, and the Jewish Federation of Central New Jersey, and the Union County Office of Cultural and Heritage Affairs. Featured in the performance were Yusef Abdul and the West Patterson College Jazz Ensemble, Harold Seletsky, and the West End Klezmorim, and the Elizabeth High School Gospel Choir. The performance was a moving experience for the performers as well as the audience. We'd like to give you just a taste of what electrified the audience that night. Our program is entitled One Voice, One Heart. Our guests are Yusef Abdul and Harold Seletsky. Welcome to Judaism Today. Yosef, you're the composer of this One World Suite. How did you get into this whole idea?
The whole idea, Jack, came about actually in 1994 when I was commissioned to write some music for a program that was being presented by the Chinese Association in the NAACP in Highland Park in the New Brunswick area, where there was going to be a program celebrating the Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday during that time, and celebrating the commonalities in the two cultures. So I composed a piece entitled One World Suite. The theme of the program was called Many Voices, One World. And what I had been doing for some time, Jack, is looking at the commonalities in the music of all the ancient cultures, in Chinese culture, in Hebraic culture, in African culture, in Indian culture. And I found that there was a commonality, a world body of music that had one source, and that was the use of these pentatonic tonalities. So One World Suite is based upon pentatonic tonalities. And so that is really the origin of me looking into composing such a composition.
By the way, there's one person I think I have to really give a lot of credit for being behind what happened. Susan Cohen from the Union County Cultural Heritage Affairs Commission. She's been absolutely very creative and very important in this whole process.
Yes, she has.
What was your reaction when you were first approached on this idea of a program bridging the two communities?
Well, the strange part of it is that I had been trying to do this now for some time. And the even more stranger part of it is that as a result of certain things that have occurred, we've been asked as our group to do with a Carnegie Hall concert, as a matter of fact, somewhere in June. But originally, we, as a klezmer group, gave a concert up in Pine Plains for a charity for a Catholic school, or Catholic church, actually, that wanted to build a school. And the audience was nearly all non-Jewish. And a friend of mine who was there, who realized, he said, my God, he says, if you can reach out to these people who are not Jewish and have this kind of effect and this kind of success, why couldn't you reach out to some people in Crown Heights and see if you can do that in those particular kind of areas? That was about 3 or 4 years ago. So actually, I have been trying to really put these kind of things together really for some time. And then all of a sudden, this whole thing really just came to be in a way that was really very surprising. And I must say, really quite frankly, that the joy that I had on that night was far superior to probably any other time. I was absolutely in heaven for 3 or 4 days after that. It was a great experience.
We'll hear a little bit of your clarinet later. It shows, let me tell you. What was your reaction when you were first approached on this whole thing?
Well, again, I must agree with you and have to give so much credit to Susan Cohen, who I initially went to in terms of doing such a program as we did on that date. she had faith in me. She had faith in putting together such a program. And one of the best things we did was to contact Harold Seletsky and West End Klezmorim to have them a part of this project. I was also very, very pleased and overwhelmed in terms of the product that became a part as a result of this program. The whole idea of working together with Harold and Ellis and all of the musicians with the Klezmorim in producing this program and making all of these things, this concert possible. The choir, the harp ensemble, the members of the staff at Elizabeth High School, the members of the staff at William Patterson College, the jazz ensemble of 13, 14 musicians, John Coliani, who was the arranger and conductor for One World Suite. All of the pieces came together. It was a trying time, and rehearsals, etc. There was demanding.
I have to interrupt you.
But
I have
yes.
to interrupt you. Okay.
Sure.
I think the whole idea of creating the thing, I mean, the composition itself, that's, I think, most important. And I think the composition really tells a lot, and I think it's really great.
Well, thank you. Thank you,
and
Harold.
I think, and I wouldn't want to minimize, because the impulse to do that composition is, I think, very, very important in the whole thing of really wanting to do, aside from just creating a composition, the idea of doing something that really has this kind of political meaning, I think.
Well, from an outstanding artiste as you, it's really a compliment.
Music has been described as a universal language. How does this exemplify that concept? Because what you've written and what you've performed really kind of expresses that universal communication.
Harold.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. When I play now, when I play Jewish music, I'm not talking, actually I learned this, and begins to translate into other fields such as classical music. But when I play, there is a feeling basically to really say something and really hold an audience together. The idea is really to do something that really, really has an effect upon the audience, and that I'm really talking to the audience and really trying to do something that is in some ways spiritually that you cannot do with words. Music is in some ways a nonverbal communication. And it's that kind of thing that's really inexplicable, but at the same time, there's something very real about it, even though it's invisible. There's something very real about the fact that the effect that music has on you, you can't really tell what it is. It makes me feel good, but the real thing of what music is there's something, it's like from another part of the brain that can't be explained.
We want to get some more music in. What we're going to do now is have a little more of the One World piece. We're going to have our break, and then we're going to come back with you beginning your klezmer clarinet performance. So we'll take our break. We'll be back in as soon as we finish this break.
Statistics show that the average person over a lifetime has 75,302 dreams, 3.8 surprise parties, 563 pairs of socks, and 8.6 different jobs. Is educated by 39.7 teachers, laughs 1.5 million times, finds $8.15 in the sofa, tries 12 different hairstyles, plays 6.4 sports, and owns 3.5 pets. But the average person only has one life, so why mess it up with drugs? A message of 29.3 seconds from a drug-free Navy and Marine Corps.
Sometimes when you hear him crying, you can't see him. Other times when you can see him, you can't pick him up. When you can pick him up, your legs might not work to get you there. Multiple sclerosis randomly attacks the nervous system, so you never know what life will be like from one day to the next. After 50 years of helping people with MS, we're closer than ever to a cure. Help us find it.
Back to our Judaism Today presentation, One Voice, One Heart, with our guests, Yusef Abdul and Harold Seletsky, and we promise we will be back for more music. I have to tell you, it's been very difficult creating the balance between music and the conversation, because we do want to have the conversation, but we feel we must have some more of that music. What do jazz and klezmer have in common? What's the commonality that provides this basis for communication? Both of you, really.
Well, for one thing, actually, we had spoke about it. For one thing, they have generally the same meter, the same, not all together, but not in the most sophisticated sense, but the basic tenets of when these things began. African American music began with a march. It was like 1, 2, 3, 4. And klezmer music basically is also or which is also a 4/4. Then, of course, there's a lot of other sophistications, but that's one thing that they really join themselves in. That's where why you can take songs and translate them into both idioms. You can take the same songs, and you can do Won't you come home, Bill Bailey? Won't you come home? Da 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 da. But and then to play it, da 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 dee da dee da 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 dee da. There's a you can take the same tunes and translate them in both idioms.
How about from a socially historical perspective, the origins of klezmer and the origins?
Well, I think one of the things that, and as Harold said, we were talking about it, is that the idea of self-expression, being able to express oneself as a musician more freely, because that you're not restricted to the words, to the music that's on the paper. And I think that's one of the main ingredients in jazz, as you know, is improvisation. And I think that klezmer shares that element, and certainly jazz is based to a large part upon improvisation, although not totally on improvisation. But I think that idea of self-expression, which is in terms of, from an ethnomusiological perspective, symbolic representation, is really democracy in action. That's what it is. It's free self-expression. And I think that klezmer and jazz certainly exemplify that democratic ideal of self-expression.
Freedom of expression.
Freedom of
Sure,
expression,
yeah.
absolutely.
But they were also, the other thing that they have in common is the fact that they were both born out of the streets, in a sense, practically. I mean, they were both born. The improvisational situation came about because that was a way of expressing themselves.
Yes.
Klezmer music was essentially street music. I mean, they were beggars, basically, who just went around begging for playing in here and begging for a penny there. And the whole African-American history of music was exactly that kind of situation as well, that they got together and they played things that they kind of was easy to play without being taught, and they just went around and played in the streets. And the same thing with break music. So there was a commonality in terms of its origins.
Is it fair to say that jazz and klezmer very much address the message that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to communicate?
I suggest that the freedom of expression is exactly that, what Dr. Martin Luther King talked about, in his dream, in his speeches about freedom of expression, about being able to express oneself, exemplifies what he
didn't he say that
talked about
during the Berlin Festival?
Well, in the speech for the 1964 Berlin Jazz Festival, he made a speech about jazz, how the jazz had a universal message that spoke to the yearnings and the aspirations of mankind, not only just for African Americans, but for all people.
Getting beyond this technical stuff,
Yes.
We want to look into your heart.
Okay.
What did you get out of this program, this experience of working together with Harold and his fine musicians, and you working with his creative skills? And I want to get both of you to, what did you get out of this?
Well, it was very rewarding. Very rewarding. It was, as I said, we had some great lunches together, Alice, Harold, and John Coliani, and myself. The whole idea of planning the programs and rehearsals, there was camaraderie. And of course, after seeing the finished product, it was exhilaration. So I think that us planning and producing the program, working together, making all this happen in itself was a very rewarding experience.
But there's a symbolism that's involved. The symbolism of two cultures really coming together. One of the things that
We're going to be interrupted by the music, so we won't have too long.
One of the situations that occur is that when all of these tensions between ethnic cultures come together, or really draw people apart, the result is politically a disaster. It means that people basically are fighting amongst themselves and things really happen. But when all of a sudden you have these two ethnic groups coming together and producing something that is different than you ordinarily would have had, as you will see, as I know, is that what happens is we come up with something that's totally different than anything else.
The music is coming back. I thank you so much for coming, and we're going to close with the music.